Sometimes, what destroys a garden isn't a harsh winter. It's believing that spring has arrived too soon. April 2017. In just 1 week, overnight frost swept across France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and Switzerland. Entire vineyards were devastated, fruit orchards were destroyed, and billions of euros worth of crops carefully nurtured throughout the winter were lost in a single night. But here's the part that still surprises me every time I think about it. Most of that destruction wasn't caused by the frost itself. It was caused by people who planted too early. An unusually warm March convinced countless gardeners that spring had finally arrived. But nature hadn't made its final move yet. If you garden anywhere in Europe, the same mistake could still cost you your plants this season. Today, we'll uncover the 7 most common spring gardening mistakes that silently kill healthy plants. More importantly, I'll show you exactly how to avoid every one of them before it's too late. If you're ready, let's get started. Mistake number 1. Planting too early. Every spring, thousands of gardeners make exactly the same mistake. The first warm days arrive. Garden centers fill with beautiful seedlings. And suddenly, it feels like winter is over. So tomatoes, peppers, courgettes, cucumbers, and beans all go into the ground weeks too early. Then one cold night changes everything. The plants don't fail because they were unhealthy. They fail because spring wasn't actually here yet. This is one of the most expensive gardening mistakes in Europe, and it happens every single year. The problem is simple. We trust today's temperature instead of our local last frost date. The Royal Horticultural Society recommends waiting until the risk of frost has completely passed before planting tender crops outdoors, depending on where you live. That could mean late April, mid-May, or even June. As you can see on the table, safe planting dates vary dramatically across Europe, and science confirms why that matters. A peer-reviewed study published through the NCBI found that damaging late spring frosts can still occur across much of Central Europe well into mid-May. In severe cases, established fruit trees lost more than 90% of their seasonal growth. For young vegetable seedlings, a single frost is often enough to destroy them completely. The solution is surprisingly simple. Don't plant because the weather feels warm. Plant because your local frost season is truly over. A few extra days of patience can save an entire season. Mistake number 2. Not hardening off. The second mistake is not planting seedlings outside. The real mistake is planting them outside before they are ready for the outside world. A seedling grown on a windowsill, in a warm room, or under a grow light has never truly experienced real garden conditions. For weeks, it has had no wind, no cold nights, no harsh sunlight, and no sudden temperature changes. It may look strong, green, and healthy indoors, but that does not mean it is ready to survive outdoors. It only means it has grown comfortably in a protected environment. The moment you move it straight into the garden, everything changes. Wind hits the leaves, the sun becomes stronger, the soil may still be cold, and nighttime temperatures can drop quickly. That is when the plant goes into shock. The leaves can curl, wilt, or burn. Growth can stop completely. And sometimes, the healthy seedling you spent weeks raising can collapse in just a few days. This is why hardening off is such a critical step. It means gradually training seedlings for outdoor life over 7 to 14 days. In the first few days, place them outside for only a short time in a sheltered, shaded spot. Then, little by little, increase their time outdoors and slowly expose them to more light and gentle wind. If the nights are still cold, bring them back inside. By the end of this transition, the seedlings become stronger, tougher, and far more prepared for the real garden. So the second mistake is simple. Assuming a healthy-looking seedling is already ready. Growing the seedling is only the beginning. Preparing it for the outside world is what saves the season. Mistake number 3, working wet soil. The third mistake is digging, hoeing, planting, or even walking on your soil while it is still wet. This is one of the easiest mistakes to make in spring, especially in European gardens. After weeks of rain, gardeners become impatient. The first morning, the surface looks dry. It feels like the perfect time to start working. But the real danger is hidden below the surface. Even if the top layer looks ready, the soil underneath may still be heavy, sticky, and saturated with water. When you work wet soil, you destroy the tiny air pockets inside it. These spaces are essential. Roots use them to breathe, water moves through them, and soil life depends on them. But when wet clay soil is dug, stepped on, or compacted too early, that structure collapses. The soil becomes dense, airless, and difficult for roots to penetrate. Over time, a hard, compacted layer can form beneath the surface, causing poor drainage, weak roots, slow plant growth, and unproductive beds for the entire season. So, the real mistake is not simply working with wet soil. The real mistake is damaging the soil structure before the growing season even begins. The solution is simple. Test before you dig. Take a handful of soil and squeeze it. If it stays together as a sticky ball, it is still too wet. Do not dig, plant, or walk on the bed. Wait a few more days. If the soil crumbles easily when you open your hand, it is ready to work. While you wait, you are not wasting time. You can protect your beds from heavy rain with cardboard, tarpaulin, or mulch. If you must enter the garden, use a wooden plank to spread your weight instead of stepping directly on the soil. And if wet soil is a recurring problem, raised beds, compost, and better drainage can completely change your spring gardening. In short, the solution is not to rush into the garden the moment the surface looks dry. The solution is to make sure the soil is truly ready, because a successful season does not begin with strong seedling alone. It begins with healthy, breathable soil. Mistake number 4, overwatering. Overwatering feels like caring, and that is exactly what makes it so dangerous. A plant may look weak, yellow, and wilted, but the soil beneath it can already be saturated with water. When soil stays too wet, oxygen is pushed out of the root zone, and without oxygen, roots begin to suffocate. Soon after, they can start to decay. The most dangerous part is that the symptoms of overwatering and underwatering often look almost identical: wilting leaves, yellowing, and stunted growth. So a gardener sees a struggling plant, adds more water, and unknowingly makes the problem worse. This is how root rot begins. Wet conditions create the perfect environment for opportunistic soil pathogens like Pythium and Rhizoctonia. Recovery can be slow, sometimes taking weeks, and in severe cases, the plant may never fully recover. The solution is simple: use the finger test. Push your finger about 5 centimeters into the soil. If it feels wet, do not water. If it feels dry, water deeply. Never rely on a fixed schedule. Water less often, but more thoroughly when the plant truly needs it. Mistake number 5, fertilizing without testing. When you fertilized your garden last spring, did you actually know what your soil needed? Or did you simply guess? That's exactly what most gardeners do. The moment plants slow down or leaves begin to lose their color, we assume the answer is more fertilizer. But what if fertilizer isn't the problem at all? Here's something that surprises most people. Under the European Union's Common Agricultural Policy, soil testing is mandatory for farmers receiving EU subsidies. Not recommended, not encouraged, required. Because applying fertilizer without knowing what's already in the soil is considered by agricultural research to be an entirely empirical practice. In other words, expensive guesswork. The first time I tested my own garden soil, I was convinced it needed more nitrogen. I couldn't have been more wrong. The results showed my soil already contained too much nitrogen. What it actually lacked was potassium. If I had added the fertilizer I originally planned to use, I would have made the nutrient imbalance even worse. Research also shows that overfertilizing can cause salt to build up in the soil. That reduces water uptake, scorches leaf edges, slows healthy growth, and weakens root development. The surprising part is that plants often look healthy at first. They appear lush, green, and vigorous. But beneath the surface, the roots are struggling. So when should you actually fertilize? How often should fertilizer be applied during the growing season? Do tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and fruit trees all need the same nutrients? Should you choose organic fertilizer or synthetic fertilizer? And how do you know which NPK ratio is right for your soil? Those questions deserve an entire video of their own. For now, remember the most important rule: test your soil first. Then give it only the nutrients it actually needs. The biggest gardening mistake isn't choosing the wrong fertilizer, it's applying fertilizer before you know what your soil is missing. And if you'd like me to make a complete guide explaining exactly when to fertilize, how often to fertilize, how to choose the correct NPK ratio, the differences between organic and synthetic fertilizers, and a simple fertilizer schedule you can follow throughout the season, let me know in the comments by writing fertilizer. I'll cover everything step by step in a dedicated video. Mistake number 6, planting too close. When seedlings are small, it's tempting to plant them closer together. The garden bed looks fuller, neater, and more satisfying. But just a few weeks later, those same plants begin competing for water, nutrients, and sunlight. Even worse, overcrowding traps humid, still air between the leaves, creating the perfect environment for fungal diseases such as gray mold, botrytis, powdery mildew, and blight. By the time these diseases become visible, they're often very difficult to control. The solution is surprisingly simple. Trust the spacing recommendations on the plant label, and if possible, leave about 10% more space than suggested. Your garden may look too empty in spring, but by midsummer, that extra space allows healthy airflow, stronger plants, better harvests, and significantly fewer disease problems. Mistake number 7, pruning at the wrong time. Have you ever had a healthy shrub that grew beautifully all year, but never produced a single flower? Maybe the plant wasn't the problem. Maybe it was the moment you picked up the pruning shears. Here's what many gardeners never realize. Some flowering plants begin forming next year's flower buds months before winter even arrives. So when you prune at the wrong time, you're not just removing branches. You're removing next season's flowers. Other plants do exactly the opposite. They bloom only on fresh new growth produced in spring. That's why treating every plant the same is one of the most expensive mistakes a gardener can make. Fortunately, the solution is surprisingly simple. Before making your first cut, learn one thing. Does your plant bloom on old wood or on new wood? If it blooms on old wood, prune it immediately after flowering. If it blooms on new wood, prune it in late winter or early spring before new growth begins. That single piece of knowledge can completely transform the way your garden performs. And remember, in gardening, almost every branch will grow back, but a flower you prune away at the wrong time won't come back until next year. If you avoid even one of the 7 mistakes we've covered today, your garden could look completely different next spring. If you found this series helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribed for more science-based gardening advice. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Which plant has been the biggest disappointment in your garden, and why? Leave your answer in the comments. It might inspire our next deep dive gardening video. Because sometimes, one small decision today becomes hundreds of flowers tomorrow.